Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, frequent flyers. Today in the lounge, I have my dear friend and guest, Kirby Runyon. He is a PhD and he is here to talk to us about awe inspired living or the outer space lifestyle, which, as you can imagine, being a space geek myself, I immediately said, I want to talk about this on the show. One of the quotes I came across as we were putting together the notes is train yourself to be in awe of the subtle, and you will live in a world of beauty and ease. This is by Rodney Yee, a well known yoga instructor and meditation teacher. Today, we're going to be talking about the what, why, and how of an outer space lifestyle, how geology is not boring in the slightest, and how we can be enchanted with the planet that we do live on, and zero G flight and how it pivots your perspective. Kirby, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks, Sarah. Really glad to be on with you.
So, Kirby, how did you get involved in geology? Give us a little bit of your origin story on from the Earth to outer space.
Right. Well, I used to think geology was boring. I mean, to the extent that I even thought about it, to the extent that I even thought about it at all, I was just like, ew, boring. It's just dusty, dry rocks. How could that be interesting?
Right.
But I've always been a space geek. I don't know when I wasn't interested in it. I mean, at least since I was 3 years old, that's when Space Shuttle Discovery returned the space shuttle fleet to active flying after the Challenger accident. There's pictures of me at the Space Museum when I was 3. So maybe something in that got me excited about space. But
Yeah.
throughout elementary, middle, high school, I was intending to go into astrophysics. I just loved space, and I remember this point in high school where I thought, do I want to go into engineering and design the spacecraft that go into space, or do I want to be a scientist who studies space itself? And just the way I framed that in my mind, I chose science.
Okay.
I thought the only space science out there, though, was astrophysics. I was wrong. There's lots of sciences that touch on space. Like literally every science, whatever you think of, you can do a space version of that. I didn't know that at the time, though. And so I went into college as a physics major, but I'm terrible at math. I managed to get finish my bachelor's in physics,
Yeah.
but with like C's all the way through. And I worked my butt off for those C's. Those were not like lazy person C's.
Right.
But my advisor was like, Kirby, astrophysics, a PhD, and that's just going to be more of all this math and physics you're struggling with. And around that time, though, I was really involved with reading a lot of the blogs on the Planetary Society website, which I had been a member of since middle school. And I realized that all of these scientists working on the Mars rovers or working on the Cassini orbiter at Saturn that was flying by all these icy moons, a lot of them weren't astronomers. They were geologists. I mean, if you're an astronaut on the moon or Mars or maybe one of Jupiter's icy moons, look around you. What is it? It's all rocks everywhere. In fact, these places we study, they're rocks. And when I found out that flying spacecraft throughout the solar system, which is really exciting, or astronauts going to the moon, when I realized that the science you would do would most obviously be geology, I pivoted to focusing my long-term graduate school goals, not on astrophysics, but on geology, specifically planetary geology. And I knew it was going to be boring at first. I was going to have to take all these Earth geology classes. I didn't care about Earth geology. I wanted to study the moon or Mars or something.
Right.
But I gritted my teeth. I got through historical geology, understanding Earth's past. And I eventually got into master's program at Temple University, a PhD program at Johns Hopkins University. And I really fell in love with geology. I really discovered that, hey, geology wasn't boring after all. And that was, but space was my gateway drug to really getting into geology as a way to understand how planets work.
I love that. And I love that, most people would actually think it's the other way around, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to study something here on Earth, and then how do we apply it to space, right?
Most of my colleagues are like that.
Yes, right. And I think from what I've been exposed to in my own personal self interest, and especially this last year, really diving into the community where I've met people like you and Dr. Cyan Proctor and the Analog Astronaut Society. And she's
Mm-hmm.
also in geology, right? And
That's
so
right.
understanding how sometimes what we think is the first step might actually be a later step has been super fascinating. And I love that you said that space was the passion that actually got you to focus about what's going on here on Earth.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
So a lot of people often ask the question, why space? So
Sure.
let me pose that to you. Why space?
Well, thank you for asking. I've actually written an op-ed piece about this that's on the Baltimore Sun website. And I love that question. Why should we explore space? Why should we do anything with space? Isn't it just for a few esoteric space geeks? And the answer is no. I mean, if you're, it's like saying that space is only for geeks and nerds, or is like saying that the ocean is only for oceanographers,
Right.
or it's like saying that the Grand Canyon is only for geologists, or that airplanes are only for pilots. No, if you like nature, if you are a nature lover, if you are someone who maybe doesn't necessarily pursue adrenaline, although that's okay, but you're someone who pursues awe, that feeling of inspiration, then space is for you. Just
Mm.
as someone who doesn't know anything about geology can still be completely, awestruck by standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon at sunset and then seeing the moon rise overhead into a star-filled night sky.
Mm.
You don't need to be a scientist to appreciate that. In the same way, you don't need to be a scientist to appreciate the incredible vistas on the moon that we have from both human and robotic spacecraft, or enjoying the morning fog in Valles Marineris on Mars, or seeing sunset on Saturn, which we have pictures of that from the Cassini spacecraft. You don't have to be a scientist to appreciate that. But anyone who loves awe can find a lot of that awe fulfilled in just understanding what's happening in space exploration and figuring out how to have some of those experiences without leaving Earth.
I love that. And I think what would be helpful for the audience too is to define awe. And,
Hmm.
it's this reverence, this experience of something that's so majestic and so powerful that it really, you're not thinking about the future and filled with anxiety, and you're not thinking about the past and worry and rumination, but it's this wonder. And actually, awe, if you look at the definition, also is a mixture of fear in
Hmm.
there, some
Hmm.
dread, because
Hmm.
it's which I found very interesting. I'm a big I love looking at the etymology of words and their origin, as
Yeah.
well as what they're composed of. Similar, I suppose, to geology, right? What's the origin of this rock? What is it
Hmm.
composed of? That gives us clues and information about how we learn and how we can apply that knowledge to other things. And so, when we look at space, it's awe-inspiring, but it's also
Hmm.
terrifying, right? What is it? It's the great expanse. It's nothing, it's everything. We could die if we go out there, if we're not in a suit, right?
Yeah.
The same thing with the Grand Canyon or these mountains, right? It's beautiful, but at the same time, can be treacherous, right? If
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
not aware of the snakes that are around, or
Yeah.
get lost on a trail and we're exposed to the elements. But
Yeah. I
go ahead.
think something along with awe for me, there's a sense of transcendence, a little
Mm,
bit of coming outside of yourself, maybe a little bit.
yes.
Um, a, a sense of being around something that is so much bigger or grander than yourself. I heard someone say, no one looks at a beautiful star-studded night sky and thinks, wow, aren't I fantastic? That doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think I truly believe that when we move away from me and we
Mhm.
focus on the we, right? We go into the community, we are of service, we go shoulder to shoulder when we do things, then that is where we find a lot of our purpose. That's where we find enjoyment. And we can also find the awe in the mundane. That was
Mhm.
something that I had to learn. How can I find awe or even just comfort or joy in some of the small things? Instead of getting frustrated at, oh, I've got to do laundry, can I instead find joy in the fact that, hey, I have my own washer and dryer,
Hmm.
and I have the opportunity to be able to go into a meditative state when I do this practice, rather than, getting myself all worked up of like, oh, I've got to do this chore and it's not fun. And I think that's what you're really trying to say here, is that we don't have to actually physically go to outer space. While you and I would love to do that
I would love
tomorrow,
to go.
right?
Yeah.
I'll go right now. If somebody knocks
Right.
on my door and is like, Sarah, you got to cut the podcast short, we're going. I'm like, okay, Kirby, I'll
Yeah.
call you
Bye. Yeah.
back. Right. But we can find awe in Mother Nature all around us here on planet Earth.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out how to get into a meditative state with folding laundry. Maybe I can learn some of that from you,
Yes.
or some of the other mundane areas of life. But you're right. There's so many. You know, whether it's binoculars at the night sky, all the way up to paying for a zero gravity flight, a zero G flight, and getting to experience that sense of transcendent awe. That is a whole feeling unto itself. Or
Absolutely.
going to some of the beautiful. I'm really drawn to the desert. I grew up in Michigan. I live in Maryland now. There's a lot of trees, which is great. But I really love the rocky landscapes, and there's a sense of awe when you can strip away the vegetation and just see these huge rock landscapes. Or anytime you fly west of the Rockies,
Right.
especially flying over southern Utah. Wow, I've looked out my window just on a commercial flight and just been totally gobsmacked at, oh my goodness, just the canyons down there. It's amazing.
Yeah, I just had a flight diversion last week coming back from Hong Kong, and we had to land in Anchorage for an emergency
Oh,
medical situation. And I looked out the window and just I was gobsmacked by these beautiful white mountains, and it
yeah.
was this almost silence, visual silence, right? And so
Hmm.
when we talk about exploring these other planets or the moon, these exoplanets, a lot of them will be rocky. And so how
Yeah.
can we find beauty in something that's different, and allowing ourselves to get swept up in that, I think, is a really beautiful practice. So how would you how would you encourage people to start to bring that in, to invite more awe into their lives? You talk about the outer space lifestyle. Can you
Hmm.
tell us a little bit more about that?
The outer space lifestyle is all it can be all encompassing, and it can be very simple. I'm a very visual person, and there are so many fantastic photographs. I mean, we're in a good time right now because the James people know about the James Webb Space Telescope. The
Yes.
pictures from that. I mean, I'm sure you've seen them, and they're
Yes. Gorgeous.
incredible.
Yeah.
And we have backlogs of images going back decades from robotic spacecraft around the solar system. If you want to see like movies of volcanoes erupting on Jupiter's moon Io, we have that. If you want to see a solar eclipse over Pluto, we have that picture. If you want to see, like I said, morning fog in the canyons of Mars, we have that picture. There's all these Instagram channels and places on NASA's website to just get that visual feast. It can also just be intentional about the kind of entertainment you pick, even like from science fiction to science fact, documentaries and Star Trek. I
Yeah.
love it all. Um, it can be intentional about getting your binoculars out and going looking at the moon, which is, that's free to cheap.
Right.
Um, and it can be if you go on vacation somewhere, looking at the landscape around there, and that can just be turning on the satellite view in Google Maps or Apple Maps and looking at the landscape around there and finding what fills you with awe. And planning your vacation around that. It could also mean going to a place that's within the path of the totality for the 2024 solar
Yes.
eclipse. I'm planning to do that with some friends.
Awesome.
And that seeing a total solar eclipse, and it has to be full. It can't be 99.9%. It has to be 100% totality to get the effect. Because if there's a little bit of the sun poking out, it doesn't count because it's still too bright. That is a way to have awe. So it can be even how you plan vacations, and
Right.
it can go on up in price from there. It can be getting a zero G flight. It can be paying to go out on a guided tour. I do some of that. And it can be even taking we were talking earlier, I went on a stunt plane ride earlier to simulate a space launch. The G forces are very similar. And it could be the types of activities you do. So, I mean, that's a little snapshot of everything that the outer space lifestyle can encompass.
I love that. I actually just filled out a survey before we came on, about some of the activities that I currently partake in and some of the activities that I would like to do in the next 1 or 2 years. And these included things like mountaineering, rock climbing, scuba diving, snowboarding and skiing, et cetera, and skydiving. So all of these
Mhm.
things that we can do here, skydiving is another great way to experience awe, or going on an acrobatic
Being
flight, right?
terrified, yeah.
Yeah.
I've done it once, and that's good.
That was enough for you.
Yeah.
And it can be something as simple as, going to a beautiful field of sunflowers, right? It doesn't have
Mhm.
to be, as you said, to your point earlier, this huge adrenaline rush.
Right.
And there will always be people who do seek that, and that's wonderful. And there's many ways we can do that here on Earth that give us that awe and that wonder, and can also help us to learn more about ourselves, because sometimes the idea of something is more sexy than the actual thing, right?
Yes, that can be
Um,
true.
Yes,
Yeah.
there was a great panel at New Worlds last week. So for those of
Hmm.
you who are not familiar, New Worlds is a space event where researchers and scientists and astronauts and everybody doing innovative tech in space come together and they have conversations about, the new horizon, the new frontier. And there was a panel that was very well attended called Sex in Space. And of course, everyone's like, oh, yeah, that'd be great, right? Like the 200-mile high club sounds so fun. Well, I invite anyone who's listening to this right now to go and Google how water acts in space and then just, let your imagination take you from there. So there's a lot of things in all the repercussions that we don't necessarily think about. And when they started to, go into detail, it was, oh, you know what? Actually, this may not be the most fun. Maybe I would enjoy a gravity environment
Some gravity
to,
for that. Yeah, probably.
right. Um, so, it is about learning, right? And so when we give ourselves an opportunity to explore our surroundings and learn about it and be in relationship with it, then we can invite more of this wonder into our lives. And it doesn't have to be very expensive. So April 8th, where are you going to be next year? That's when the full solar eclipse will be happening in North America. There's a large path of totality, actually, but where are you going to be?
I will be northwest of Memphis with a couple of good friends in an Airbnb in Arkansas along the
Beautiful.
path of
Okay.
Tennessee.
Yeah, for those of you who want to learn more, you can go to eclipsefest.org and learn more about it, or just Google April 8th, 2024. And you can learn where the path of totality is. You might actually live in the city. Austin will get 2.5 minutes, and just west of Austin, there'll be 4.5 minutes, like
Mm.
out in Kerrville. There's going to be a music festival. There's going to be all sorts of events happening. And so I'm sure in everybody's local areas, there will be a lot because this is a big deal. And when you watch videos of people experiencing a full solar eclipse together, it's
Mhm.
really quite magical because not only is it getting that awe and that wonder, but that eye falls away. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, it's we are experiencing this beautiful thing and sharing that joy of it all together.
Did you get to experience the 2018 solar eclipse in North America?
I was in Hong Kong at the time, so no.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that was my first total solar eclipse. And it was almost like I was sort of touching the moon. There was that
Yeah,
transcendent awe of like, I'm literally in the shadow of the moon right now.
so
And that
cool.
that was a cosmic connection I wasn't experiencing or I wasn't expecting to experience. And
Yeah.
looking up at this black hole in the sky where the sun used to be, and then seeing the plasma, the 10,000 degree plasma of the sun's corona, and then seeing stars. I saw the star Regulus in the constellation Leo during that
Wow.
eclipse. I'm pretty sure I saw like Venus and Jupiter, which were up during the day, but like it was so like I want to say magical, but that doesn't even feel right. It was
Yeah, there's no
transcendent. It was
words.
transcendent.
Yeah, it's ephemeral, it's effervescent.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that when you experience it, and it's very hard to put into a contextual, verbal experience for others. Imagine for those of you who are maybe struggling, imagine it's 1 p.m. in the afternoon, which is what it's going to be in Texas when it happens next year. And all of a sudden, it's dark outside and the stars come out and the animals, you hear animals that normally only come out at night start to make sounds and you see this ring of fire, Johnny
Mm-hmm.
Cash, Ring of Fire.
That's right.
So it's going to be a real special experience, and I encourage everyone to check it out and learn a little bit
Yeah.
more. Now, I want to address one of the comments we had from Gary Baker. He talked about, he knows a student who got their aerospace engineering degree, but now this person owns his own business making parts to go into space, and that grades are not always good for gauging skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to talk about that because I think a lot of people, what prevents them from going after a degree is that they think it always has to be engineering or science or math and tech, obviously the STEM fields, but
Mm-hmm.
we also know that creative pursuits are just as important for our exploration of space. They foster new thinking. They will help us to, if you're on the moon, you're still going to want art and music and good tasting food if we've got colonies up there, right? But we still need accountants in space. We still need marketers in space. We still
Yes.
need salespeople. It doesn't have to be the person actually making the rocket. You can still be involved and be a part of something greater.
I'm really glad you said that. And some of our mutual contacts have talked about how we're going to need welders and plumbers and electricians in space.
Yeah.
You don't have, and I mean, this kind of gets back to some of the things I was talking about. You don't have to be the space geek to do cool space stuff. Whatever thing you like or that you do, there's a way to do a space version of that.
Yes.
And we're going to need, blue collar workers. We're going to need desk workers. We're going to need knowledge workers of every type in the space field. So we're going to need concierges in space hotels.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that, being in aviation for the last 15 years, I've faced time and time again, when you say you're in aviation, and I've worked in a very specific subset with business jets. So people, the first thing they do is, oh, you work for an airline. It's like, well, no, not exactly. And you try to explain, and it's still hard to fathom for most people. And what you just said there, we're still going to need technicians. We're still going to need plumbers. And yes, the technology will be different because the climate, the gravity will all be different based on where we are. But I'll give you an example. In Australia, you can actually get a visa for some of these jobs, like being a plumber, being a tradie as the
Really?
local.
Tradie.
Yes. And so there's not enough people who have these skills. And
Oh,
so they will actually offer a visa to someone who is a qualified electrician, and some of these rules. Now, obviously, the quotas change and the requirements change. But imagine that's your pathway, right? So,
yeah.
and Dr. Cyan, her pathway was her poetry.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of non-traditional paths into space, and we need everyone to be involved. And in that process of getting ourselves interplanetary and expanding our consciousness to conceive of the technology that can help us get there, we grow as a species, right? And we can also start to apply those lessons and learnings here on Earth as well. It's not just about, oh, we've used up everything on this planet. Let's go and find the next
Yeah,
one.
no, it's not
No,
that. Yeah.
no, not at all. And I think that's another common misconception that people have.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea. I like the idea that Jeff Bezos has popularized some of preserving Earth as the Garden of Eden, moving heavy polluting industry off Earth. Where there's no, like, I'm all for people wanting to live on the moon and Mars, but I don't think that's a substitute for people living on Earth. That's not Earth 2.0.
Right.
And taking care of our own Earth, moving anything that pollutes off Earth, I think could really help preserve this planet.
Yeah, beautiful. And so, the new frontier is yet to be seen for exactly what that looks like, and it could happen as soon as 6 months from now. It could happen as long as 60 years from now, and it will be an iterative process, right? We'll get one step closer each time. And so I encourage everyone to keep an open mindset and to, go check out your local planetarium, learn a little
Yeah,
bit about what's going on. The Planetary Society is a wonderful
yes, they
organization.
are.
Um, you know,
Planetary.org.
Yes, and they have an app and a membership and a whole community of people. The analog astronaut community is another
Hmm.
special way where you can get to meet like-minded individuals and go and experience and do research and be part of research that can then be applied to space missions. And so there are so many ways to get involved. If anyone watching wants to learn a little bit more, then they can always reach out to Kirby or myself or comment. We're going to be happy to answer any questions and direct you to the right resources. And Kirby, I know that you do work with NASA, and
Mhm.
they actually fund your day-to-day planetary geology research. And so, what is
Yeah.
something that you're working on right now?
Yeah, thanks. So I've got two NASA-funded projects right now. So I'm a staff scientist at the Planetary Science Institute. It's a NASA-funded nonprofit, and they're headquartered in Tucson, but most of us live all over the place. I live in Maryland. And so I'm doing geologic mapping on the moon. Yes, we've mapped the moon before, but not at very high resolution in all the places. So I'm doing very high resolution, very specific geologic mapping in a few areas. But then I'm also doing experiments understanding how ejecta gets kicked out of impact craters. Ejecta is the stuff that gets dug out of holes when meteoroids hit the surfaces of planetary bodies. And I'm looking how that happens when you dial down gravity. And the way we do that is by actually having a catapult that flings sheets of gravel in a parabolic flight airplane where we get different gravity levels. And so that's with the company Zero G, and that's on one of my NASA grants. I'm also a coach for the company. And so in addition to having weightlessness, we can also do Mars gravity, 38% Earth gravity, and the moon gravity, 17% Earth gravity. And there's also points when we do a zero gravity, a parabola, a zero gravity portion of the flight. There's portions in there where you're not quite at zero. And it's actually very good for simulating asteroid gravity. And of course, there's hundreds of millions of asteroids in the solar system. For anybody with, some knowledge of like high school physics, you've heard that Earth's gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. Well, on the largest asteroids, the gravity might be only a few centimeters per second squared. Wow. And you can get that gravity level as you're coming into weightlessness or coming out of weightlessness on a parabolic arc. And so that's long enough for us to do some of our experiments to get asteroid gravity. How does gravel on gravel behave? How does it flow and mix and churn when you've got that just a small amount of gravity? So we've got another flight coming up early in 2024. We had our first flight in late 2021. And so we're also working to write up our results in what's going to come out in a peer-reviewed scholarly journal here in the next couple of years.
That's super cool. And, it's what I love is just seeing how much you light up and the passion of which you speak about this. And that's what I've encountered. Yeah, that's what I've encountered with everybody in this space, pun intended, because it's exciting. I still remember as you were speaking, it brought me back to being a child and going to the Adler Planetarium in downtown Chicago with my mom. And they had these like tubes that you'd step into and you'd step on it and it would tell you how much you'd weigh on the moon or on Mars or on Jupiter or, whatever planet. And I always thought that was so interesting. And it was just so fun. The Magic School Bus was one of my favorite episodes, was the one where they went into outer space. And that was such a fun way. And I really do believe it's what you're exposed to when you're younger. Obviously we're very impressionable, but the possibilities that you believe in are related to and correlated to the amount of exposure you're given at younger ages of, hey, this is an opportunity. This is something to consider. Here are some pathways. And so for parents watching this, again, take your children to any museum, but definitely the planetarium, right? And get them interested. Maybe they love going to the aquarium and learning about animals, and they can be part of a rehabilitation program and just, learn a little bit. And that's such a great way to foster that interest and develop the curiosity. Do you do anything right now with younger age groups, or is it mostly adult and the more heavy research?
I'll speak occasionally to school groups on this topic, but what I'm really most passionate about is talking to teachers, because there's a multiplicative effect there. If I can get that teacher inspired and excited, then they can go and get their students excited. And a student that's excited and curious is like a teacher's dream, because they practically teach themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one way out of some of our education crises might be things that inspire awe in students, get them curious, get them researching on their own, not so that they have to fill out a bubble on a Scantron, but so that they actually are curious and want to learn and are asking their teacher so many questions that the teacher runs out of answers and has to send them to the library or to an expert to connect with a scientist that they might know. I'm available for teachers to speak. So cool. And so I love getting students, and yes, I do deal with students, but I really love talking to teachers and parents as well. I spoke at a homeschool co-op at their science fair a few months ago, and just getting and seeing, and I was presenting to the students, but the parents were just glomming on to everything that was being said. I was talking about volcanoes on the moon. Yeah. And the students loved it. I was showing pictures of volcanoes on Earth and pictures of the moon. The kids were on the edge of their seat. And then the parents were telling me they never sit still, and they sat still for that presentation. And that's so awesome. There's this power of space to get at both the parents and the kids and the teachers.
Do you hear that, parents? You can get your kids to sit still if you talk about space. Now, if that's not going to attract you to at least investigating it, I don't know what else will. But I know I'm just watching my friends with kids. I think that
Mhm,
that's great.
mhm,
But your answer there is really powerful because that the students could become curious and open-minded and ask all these questions. But if our teachers are burnt out,
mhm.
if they're not awe-inspired themselves, it's going to be what puts that cap on, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not just about focusing on the next generation and making sure they're exposed, but it's how do we keep re-inspiring teachers ourselves, the people around us, so that we don't become jaded or burnt out in our pursuits.
I think that's really beautiful, and avoiding that burnout. I think part of that is staying curious. I sign most of my emails "Stay curious"
Yes.
because I think being a lifelong learner, being a lifelong student, that doesn't stop when your formal education ends. There's education, and then there's schooling. And
Yeah.
education is supposed to happen in schooling, but when schooling's over, education should continue.
Yes.
And that's partly why I like talking to adults so much, is because I want to trick them into continuing on their education and hopefully inspire the kids in their lives to do the same thing.
I love
I
that.
I went to two liberal arts colleges for my undergrad, and they both strongly emphasize the importance of lifelong learning. And on one of my field trips that I lead, exploring the moon and Mars without leaving Earth, these geologic landscapes in New Mexico that I go to that are very similar to landscapes on the moon and Mars. One of my clients was the retired president of one of my former undergraduate institution, Houghton University.
Wow.
And she has two PhDs. The second one, she says, was just for fun. And she's not a technical person, but her perspective from the humanities that she brought into asking questions about geology and space were so interesting and so thought-provoking. And she's one of the most interesting people that I've had the pleasure of talking to in a long time, because just of where her mind goes, she's always learning. She's always learning new things, even after getting two PhDs and being a retired college president. So
I love
she was so inspiring to me to want to keep learning and staying curious in my own life.
Beautiful. And, that's also a reminder that, our clients, our children can also inspire us. It doesn't always have to be from a mentor that's older or an elder that has a lot of experience. It can often be someone who's younger. That's why I love doing advocacy for industry and, as you said, going into these career kind of environments and talking to students because they're so excited and full of energy and passion, and it helps me reignite my own,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And to what your point was earlier, I did Girls in Aviation Day earlier
Mhm.
this year, and the
Hmm.
parents were just as interested as the young girls, and in some cases more so, because some of them thought, "Wait, I could still be a pilot now? I could still learn about this now?" And it's like, "Yes, of course you can." Right?
Hmm.
And you
There's a
could even
pilot
make it
shortage.
your career if you want. Oh, there's a
Yeah,
huge pilot shortage. We were talking about that a little
yeah.
bit before we went live. Um, and it's, my teacher, I'm writing my keynote as we talked about, and the teacher was saying, don't edit yourself before you even get the words out. Right?
Hmm.
Don't start thinking, "Oh, well, what about this, this, and this?" And you edit before you even get the words out, and then look at how the pieces fit together. So put
Yes.
those puzzle pieces out on the table and then see where you can make connections. Where do they connect? What makes sense? Don't edit yourself before you get started.
I think that's a great way of saying that. And that's something I certainly struggle with when I'm writing like a technical paper for like a peer-reviewed journal. One of the blockages I have is, how do I make this sound like I'm a smart scientist? Like, how do I put this in formal science-ese? And the first thing is, no, just like get it out there. I think the way I naturally want to explain things is to like a middle schooler, probably because I'm like 12 on the inside. But just to like write out, these craters are really big and the meteors that go make them are really fast. Like, put that out first, and then I can edit it into smart scientist speak. But
Yeah.
when you're saying that, that reminded me. I have a mentor who has more time in a spacesuit prototype, at a certain spacesuit prototype, than any astronaut. He's also a geologist. He's retired now from NASA. And this also kind of goes along with, I think, your brand of like challenging the status quo. When he's got an idea he's pitching to management, or this idea he has that he's thinking about pitching to management, his attitude is make them say no. In other words, don't take yourself out of the running. Don't say, oh, they'll never go for this. I'm not going to pursue this.
Right. Yes.
Oh my goodness. It bothers me actually when people want to be astronauts, for example, and they're like, well, I'm not qualified, so I'm not even going to fill out the application. I'm like, no, you make NASA disqualify. You make somebody else. You make your management, whatever. You make them disqualify. You make them say no. Don't ever say no to yourself. That has served me well. That's also it's also one of the ways I ended up in a big career pivot was because management did say no. And I'm like, well, I'm doing it anyways. And I started my own business and left. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
So make it happen.
Yes.
Or as Richard Branson would say, screw it, let's do it. That's also the name of one of his books, maybe his only book.
I like what you said of don't say no to yourself, right? Because, and when those other people do disqualify you, there are always other paths. There are always other opportunities, right? You watch the SpaceX documentary on Netflix, and Elon talks about how Buzz Aldrin and a few other people were not so excited about him in the beginning and saying it would never work. Did he let that stop him? No. Now, whether or not you actually like him, that's a different conversation altogether. Don't let other people tell you what you can or can't or should or shouldn't do. Go and try it for yourself, but don't say no to yourself. That's really powerful.
That's right. And one way of possibly saying yes to yourself is sometimes you have to start a business, like file the paperwork, start an LLC or a nonprofit. Yeah, I did that too. Yep.
And you know, Mariba was at the conference, and he was talking about all the space debris and all these things that we also have to think about, and you know, went into a lot of different data. And someone asked the question, well, how do we begin to clean up space? And you know what his answer was?
What?
Heal your own trauma. And I thought that is a mic drop moment, because so many of us are running around trying to impress other people, trying to fit in the box, get the award, be validated. And we're not actually dealing with the core issue. And it's about when we can fix those things, we don't do all the damage that we do. We don't overconsume. We don't, you know, hurt others, because we are operating from a more clear space. And so I thought that was really powerful. And, you know, what you just said triggered that memory. So I wanted to share that.
That inner healing is huge. And as someone who's gone through that multiple times myself on numerous issues, it is so freeing once you get through that freedom, that inner healing, that can unlock so much potential and just enjoyment of life.
Absolutely. Yes. Enjoyment of life, that peace, that ease, you know, and in yoga, they have this phrase, it's Sthira Sukha Asanam, which means both strength and ease in your seat. And so it should feel strong. You should be confident, but you should also feel easy. You're not struggling and straining to be strong. So, you know, nor are you easy, but not strong. And so it's a really powerful reminder. And as we do it, it's layers, right? Shrek had it right. We are onions. We're going to peel back layers. It's not a one and done process. We will have cycles. We will go deeper.
Sure that's from Star Trek?
Well, Star Trek. No, I said Shrek, not Star Trek.
Oh, Shrek. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
I heard Shrek.
No. Although Star Trek's pretty cool too. And I'm sure there's some things that they have talked about as well. But no, that was from Shrek. Shrek and Donkey. He said ogres are like onions, but humans are like onions too.
They are. Yes, they are indeed. Yep.
So, and when we talk about owning your own business, man, that is the fast track to healing your own trauma and dealing with your own shit, because there is no one to tell you what to do. There's no one that's gonna, you know, get you back up on your feet. You've got to do it yourself, and you're gonna face all sorts of resistance. You're gonna find triggers. But it's also a very healing journey. So
yeah, in my own journey, it's exciting, it's fun, it's finally finding a way for my passion to come out as much as I want it to come out. Right. Which, like, when I was I'm half-time with the Planetary Science Institute, and then my other half-time is my own business stuff. So I do have a day job, a half-time day job, and that helps. But like the passion just comes out of me. And when I was working full-time, that passion was getting bottled up, and there wasn't like. And it could come out in evenings and weekends, but I was already tired from my job. So I didn't have energy for that. And so but it's also frustrating because it's like, when am I getting paid next? So there's
Yeah, it's that uncertainty, but at the same time, nothing is certain. COVID surely showed us that, right?
that's true.
And I'm just pulling out my book here because what I wanted to share is something that I wrote down yesterday from this article and actually put it on my LinkedIn. And it was basically saying the one question you can ask yourself that will change how you view life and how you approach it and your when it comes to purpose and fulfillment forever. And they were talking about loneliness isn't Carl Jung said loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the inability to express what matters to you most. And so this is why when we're not with like-minded people and we feel like we have to hide parts of ourselves, we can often feel very lonely even when there's a lot of people
That's
around.
right.
And so this article talks about it being a biological need to get things out, to express and be engaged with the things that matter to you so that you feel connected. And the question to ask yourself is, what do I need to get out of me? And you can even expand that to like right now, what do I need to get out of me right now? Maybe it's, that conversation that you need to have with somebody about their behavior, or maybe it's this poem or this song or this passion. And so when you look at it from that perspective, what is it that you need to get out? And it sounds like you've been letting that out. You've been letting the
Mhm.
passion out, and it's leading to beautiful things.
It is. And while you're saying that, one of it in my company, in my life, the phrase informed enthusiasm keeps coming up. And finding like-minded people where they're both informed or they want to be informed about, in my case, space, and they're enthusiastic. I found a lot of people in both camps where they're either really excited about it, uh, and they're not trying to learn more, they're not trying to know more, or you get a lot of people who know a lot about space, but I don't get that sense of passion from them. And finding community where you don't feel that loneliness, where you find that like-mindedness and you can feel yourself be yeah, informed enthusiasm. And I don't know, yes, but that has been my big channel for my passion
I
since
love
starting
that.
my business.
Yeah, informed enthusiasm. I love that phrase. It reminds me of the conversation around willingness and capability, because often very
Mm,
young in our careers, we are willing to do the things, to learn more, to put in effort, to work hard, to be disciplined. And then we become experts. And all of a sudden, we're very capable, but we're not as willing. And so it's making sure we don't fall into that trap, right? And also as leaders, putting the right people in the right seats so that we don't have a bunch of enthusiastic but not yet capable or
mhm.
informed people doing things. And at the same token, we don't have a bunch of informed but very rigid and no longer enthusiastic people running the show. We need a mix of both.
We absolutely need both, that being informed and being enthusiastic. Yep.
Yeah. And I see that Chris Hare has said management saying no is a great time to pivot and say yes to the future. Yes,
Great. Well
absolutely.
said. And if anyone listening is a middle manager, find out how to say yes. I would encourage you to find out how to say yes to those underneath you in the org chart.
Beautiful. One of the things that I have learned from theater, from improv, is yes and.
Yep.
That when something comes to you in life, yes and. How do you say yes to it and then move to the next thing? And instead of saying but, anytime you use the word but, you negate the first part of your sentence,
Mm,
right? It's
that is so
I
true.
really like you, Kirby, but you're not going to listen to anything. You're not going to think I like you. You're just going to pay attention to what I've just said. So anytime you catch yourself saying the word but, I invite you to start deleting and saying and instead, and
Mhm.
seeing how that shifts the energy for you. And speaking of shifting perspective and energy, how has the zero G flying shifted your perspective? What pivots have come from that?
Well, it's a dream come true. I think my first ever prayer as a little kid was, God, please turn off the gravity so I can float around like an astronaut. I'm not kidding about that.
I
And I
love
finally
it.
got to experience that in my 30s. And the sense of physical freedom that is
Yeah.
weightlessness is, I mean, it's frustrating to say, but you can't describe it. You have to experience it. But so right now, you're holding so much tension in your face that you're not even aware of. But when
Oh,
you're in a parabolic arc and you're weightless, it is like the most physical Zen sensation. Your arms float up like this. kind of like a zombie, and your face, if you just let your face go slack, it's hard because you've got to stop
Right?
laughing and stop smiling. Like
Yeah.
stop smiling, stop laughing, but then just that feeling of peace and freedom over your body when you're weightless is completely disorienting. There are times I thought for sure I was in the back of the plane, and when gravity turned back on, when we pulled out of the parabola, I was in the front of
Yeah.
the plane, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And upside down doesn't feel upside down. Upside down and right side up feels both the same. So it's visually confusing when you feel right side up and the plane is upside down.
Yeah.
It is so much fun. You can fly like Superman. You can fly like a bird. You can, and it's not like swimming either. Swimming is not, or scuba diving. It's fun, but it's not the same sensation.
Yeah.
Being able to squirt out some water and have this amoeba in front of you and then sucking that in. It's just a different way of looking at the world, and it's a way to. And in moon gravity, which is 1/6 the gravity of Earth, 17%. I've poured water, but you have to shake it like ketchup because the surface tension. The surface tension keeps the water from wanting to come out of its container, and then you end up
Right.
just getting like these blobby chunks of water that fall down like it's ketchup. And so
That's
that's like a different kind of perspective that weightlessness, or at least low gravity, can give you.
beautiful. Yeah. Anytime we put ourselves in a new situation, we gain a new perspective, right? And how do other people view the world? And so, something that I did, which I know won't be the same as actual zero gravity, but I did go to one of these float tanks, right? And I
Oh
think,
yeah, the sensory
it wa-
deprivation tanks.
yeah, sensory deprivation tank. I'm pretty sure one of them in Hong Kong actually call themselves like zero G float tank or something like that. Um, and I remember the first time I went in there, my brain like short circuited. It didn't know what was happening. I felt like I was spinning, but I clearly was not because I wouldn't have been
Mhm.
able to. It's shaped like an egg, right? In order to be spinning, I would have hit my legs and head on the on the side of the pod. Um, and it just took this. My brain was trying to orient itself in this new environment. And then afterwards, it was really very calming and relaxing, and being supported, but not having to use any muscles to keep me supported. And it was a very unique experience. So that might be for some people who may not be able to yet afford
Mhm.
going to zero G or may not have access. This could be something that you could give a try as well for that new perspective.
That sounds great. I haven't done that myself yet, but you're selling it. That sounds interesting.
I would love to know, Kirby, if you go for a zero G float tank experience
Uh-huh.
or a float tank experience, how it compares to zero G. So maybe that
Okay.
can be something that the next time we have you on the show, you can come back and relate to all of us since you've actually
Okay.
experienced
All
it
right.
too.
Challenge
Um,
accepted.
yes. All right, Kirby, this is fascinating. And I feel like you and we're like amping each other up and getting really
Yeah,
excited. And I
totally.
feel like we could talk for hours. So we're going to start to wrap up.
Mhm.
And I want to ask you, based on all of your experiences in life and who you are today, what do you think your superpower is?
Oh, my superpower. It it's being enthusiastic, I think, is one of them. Uh, I've had a number of times where I've had professors be like, Kirby, you're really enthusiastic. I'm like, great. I also want to get an A in the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
So I think getting people excited is one of my superpowers.
Awesome. Yeah, and energy is contagious, right? And so I am definitely in a more enthusiastic and smiley place than I was before we started the interview.
Smile is
And
a
that's
good
a
spot.
yeah, it's a beautiful superpower, right? Because it is something that we want to keep in our lives. And it's not about being enthusiastic all the time. That would also require a lot of energy, but it's how do we help lighten that load for people and bring that spark back, which is beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's knowing yourself, knowing if you're an introvert or an extrovert or somewhere in the middle,
Yes.
and knowing what you need to be healthy, even if you don't feel it in the moment.
Yes, because sometimes we can get so caught up in the enthusiasm, the experience, the fun that we then burn ourselves out. I'm
Hmm.
thinking specifically about my puppy. She will play and go after that ball or her friends until I'm the one who goes, "Hey, shall we go home now?" And she's like, "Oh, thank God, I need an out,"
Oh,
But
interesting. Okay.
she wouldn't have chosen it herself.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
will just keep going back for more and more. And so, even when we like something, or even when it's good for us, it's about knowing how do we give ourselves that pause to rejuvenate.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. So now I know you mentioned a few people already as being your mentors. And my next question I always ask my guests is who is on your personal board of directors? Now, these could be people in your life or people that you don't actually know, but have, really learned from. Who's on that board for Kirby?
I love that question. And you emailed that to me earlier today, and I've been thinking about that. And I have to put my girlfriend on there, part of it. She is such a wise person. She gets me, but she also can kind of transcend the enthusiasm sometimes to be like, well, let's look at this rationally and think about what would be a good idea.
Yeah.
She's one of the most emotionally intelligent people I know. So she is, and she's not a space person. She's not a technical person. But her wisdom and how she reads and understands people, which is amazing, is really inspiring. So she's definitely on my board of directors. My late grandfather is on there. He passed away 1 year to the day before I defended my PhD.
Mm,
And he was in radio engineering consulting. He has radio stations named after him.
beautiful.
And just he was so involved and so smart, both with technology and with people. And so I miss him, still miss him. And thinking about what he would do is inspiring or helpful when I'm trying to make decisions. So he's on there. And then and I guess other mentors just in different parts of my life. I mentioned the spacesuit guy, Dean, if you're watching, hello. And people like that. My cat is not on the board of directors down there, but she's on the cheerleading squad. Um, so I think those are some of the people on my board of directors.
Beautiful. And how would you best serve or represent humanity?
Wow.
It's a big question. I know it's designed to be.
I want to go to space and come back and tell people everything about it, including how they. And I want to write the sequel to Chris Hadfield's book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth.
Beautiful.
He spent 6 months on the International Space Station. He wrote a book of that title. And I want to go to space, come back, and not just tell people technically what it was like, but tell people what it was spiritually like, or humanistically like, or artistically like.
Beautiful. So you're here to help serve humanity by giving them the enthusiasm and the inspiration to be able to find their own purpose in life, no matter whether that's here on Earth or up in the stars.
Yes, and creating them some informed enthusiasm.
Yes, and I love that you put the yes and in there. Look at that.
I gotcha.
Amazing. Kirby, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. Where can our listeners find you if they'd like to learn more about the research that you're involved in, learn more about zero-G flights and all the
Yeah.
things that you're up to?
Yeah. Email me, Kirby@Planex.space. Find me on LinkedIn, Kirby Runyon. Last name is Runyon. Visit my website, Planex.space. So those three things. I'm on other social media, but LinkedIn is my preferred.
Beautiful. Well, you are streaming live to LinkedIn now. This will be posted to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So anyone who's watching, no matter what platform, you'll have the links to Kirby's LinkedIn as well as his website. So Kirby, thank you again so much for being here. I had so much fun with you today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.